Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Streets Committee hearing. Today is May 25th, 2021. I understand that the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at the public hearing of the council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Enquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the roll, take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you're present by saying aye? Also, feel free to give a few brief remarks when responding so that your image is displayed on screen when you speak. Dave, you're on mute.
I apologize for that, council member. Vice Chair Squilla. Council member Bass.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Thank you, Vice Chair Squilla. Councilmember Bass. Councilmember O.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am present.
Thank you, Councilmember O. Councilmember Brooks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Present.
Mr. Chairman, a quorum is present.
And I'm present too. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called into order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Streets and Services regarding bills number 200-627, 210-332, 210-333, 210-334, 210-390, 210-391, 210-392, 210-393, 210-394, 210-412, 210-413, 210-414, 210-415, 210-416, 210-422, 210-423, 210-447, and 210-448. Mr. Maynard, will you please read the titles of the bills?
Of course, Mr. Chairman. Bill 200-627, an ordinance authorizing ARD 1105 Walnut LLC or a subsequent owner to install, own, and maintain various encroachments at 1101-07 Walnut Street and 138-140 11th Street under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210332, an ordinance amending Title IX of the Philadelphia Code by amending Section 9-203 relating to street vendors by prohibiting street vending on certain portions of East Passyunk Avenue and surrounding areas. Bill 210333, an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of Greenwich Street and 2nd Street, Reed Street and South 4th Street, Moyamensing Avenue, and Wharton Street. Bill 210334, an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of Morris Street and 2nd Street. Bill 210390, an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of Dolphin Street and Belgrade Street, Almond Street and Dolphin Street, York Street and Almond Street, Taggart Street and Norris Street, Cedar Street and Norris Street, Marlborough Street and Thompson Street. Bill 210391, an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of Ellsworth Street and South 9th Street, Reed Street and South Broad Street, Mountain Street and South 6th Street, Latona Street and South 7th Street. Bill 210392, an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of Moore Street and South 6th Street, McClellan Street and South 5th Street, Mifflin Street to South 6th Street, South 3rd Street to McKean Street. Bill 210393, an ordinance amending Section 12-701 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Designation of Bike Lanes, to authorize bicycle lanes on Race Street from North 5th Street to North 4th Street, and making associated changes to parking regulations within the same limits, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210394, an ordinance authorizing encroachments in the nature of a sidewalk cafe in the vicinity of 941 South 8th Street under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210412, an ordinance establishing a no truck parking regulation on both sides of the 6400 block of Somerville. Bill 210413, an ordinance establishing a no truck parking regulation on both sides of Lober Avenue between East Upsall Street and East Torter Street. Bill 210414, an ordinance establishing a no parking regulation on North 3rd Street, both sides, between West Erie Avenue and West Sedgley Avenue. Bill 210415, an ordinance establishing a no truck parking regulation on West 65th Avenue, both sides, between North Front Street and North 2nd Street. Bill 210416, an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of North 12th Street and Champless Street, 69th Street and North 12th Street, Camac Street and Champless Avenue, Park Avenue and Nedrow Avenue, North 13th Street and Olney Avenue. Bill 210422, an ordinance regulating the direction of movement of traffic on certain portions of Paul Street, Meadow Street, Tackawanna Street, Worth Street, Pear Street, Gillingham Street, Josephine Street, Blair Street, and East Montgomery Avenue, and making associated changes to parking regulations within the same limits, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210423, an ordinance amending Section 12-1133 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled All-Terrain Vehicles, to address off-road vehicle use in the city of Philadelphia, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill 210447, an ordinance establishing a no truck parking regulation on both sides of Chester Avenue, from 66th Street to 67th Street. And finally, Bill 210448, an ordinance establishing parking regulations on both sides of Webster Street, between 20th Street and 21st Street. Those are the bills to be listed.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who's been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in attendance, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they want to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for that purpose. With that being said, Mr. Maynard, will you please call the first panel of witnesses we have to testify here this afternoon?
The first bill we'll hear on is Bill 210423. We'll hear first from Francis Healy from the Philadelphia Police Department, and then from Brittany Young. Mr. Healy, if you're logged in, you can begin your testimony when you're ready.
Good morning, sir. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas, Vice Chairperson Squilla, Councilman Don, other members of the Committee on Streets and Services. My name is Francis Healy, and I'm here on behalf of the Police Commissioner, Danielle M. Outlaw. First, thank you for allowing the Philadelphia Police Department the opportunity to voice its opinion on this very important and very timely piece of legislation. We are all very much aware of the havoc and mayhem that the illegal use of all-terrain vehicles, ATVs, and dirt bikes have wreaked upon the quality of life and safety in our neighborhoods. Without any doubt, it is nothing less than terrifying when a pack of riders on dirt bikes and ATVs come streaming through a neighborhood on sidewalks and darting in and out of moving traffic. It's to the neighbors that must endure the noise these vehicles produce, the motorists who pray not to collide with riders, and for the pedestrians forced to run for safety. When ATVs are the primary issue, this council body stepped forward, and passed an ordinance that allowed for the forfeiture of ATVs so that they would no longer be able to threaten or harm the safety of individuals. This ordinance has been a success to date, but has been more common, and motorcycles that were returned for sure. Operating within our experience as ATVs, ATVs when operating for these reasons, the police bicycles bill 2043 as this time may be interested in regards to
No. Oh, thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for members of council for this particular witness? Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your testimony. We appreciate your the information, and we appreciate your service. Mr. Maynard,
I have a couple questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Hey, thank you very much. How you doing? Francis Healy.
Good morning, sir.
All is well. Just have a couple questions regarding enforcement and enforcement around ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, dirt bikes in general. And so just what is the police department's policy? Just state for the record regarding enforcement for ATVs and dirt bikes.
Yes, I'll talk about policy. I won't talk about any actual operating procedures of what we do and how we do it, for obvious reasons. But the policy is obviously we do not pursue any vehicle. So the issue is we actually, through Deputy Commissioner Dales, he stands up several details. We call them ATV details, and the purpose of those details are to get as many of these illegal vehicles that are witnessed violating the city ordinance, and to process them and actually issue the CVNs when appropriate. The issue what we're coming across is motorcycles. As we all know, motorcycles are actually governed by the state on a lot of different issues, but the motorcycles we're dealing with here are dirt bikes. These were never intended for street use. They don't have headlights. They don't have anything along those lines. So they're completely illegal vehicles, or I'm sorry, not illegal vehicles. They don't belong on the street in any way, shape, or form. So we're trying to distinguish those from the lawful motorcycles that would be live stopped. These vehicles would be basically lumped in with the ATVs as a result of this ordinance, and will allow us to forfeit them. So this way here, you're not going to see these vehicles being recycled. If you recall, prior to the current ATV ordinance, we were seeing ATVs being recycled over and over because the law really didn't provide for forfeiture until you guys actually put forth the ordinance. So what we're doing basically through this ordinance is actually adding these dirt bikes, these illegal bikes that can't be registered, they can't be registered and inspected, and getting them into the forfeiture provision so they're not recycled, and we're seeing them over and over again on the streets.
And what are the fines and penalties when a bike is confiscated?
The fine's up to $2,000, which is the maximum under the city code.
And do you have data based upon the Philadelphia Police Department's operations, the amount and number of individuals who have received citations or gets fines and penalties as a result of confiscations of ATVs and dirt bikes?
I've requested it. I have not yet gotten it as of right this time, but I will get it to you later today or early tomorrow.
Okay. Can you have your team just provide that to members of the committee for the record? And then last, in terms of the fines, fees, and penalties, do any of them provide data if any of them result in prosecution and actual arrest, or all of them are just totally a citation for utilizing an illegal bike on the street?
Yeah, these are all city offenses, city code offenses. There's no arrest. Unless, of course, if someone's stopped and they have an illegal gun or they're wanted or something along those lines, but the mere operation of the vehicle itself is a city code violation only.
And then just last, any event that an individual, and I would think in this case a lot of these are predominantly young people, if they don't pay the citation or fines, fees, and penalties, then what happens?
The vehicle is forfeited. So that's the fine. So
that's the fine. Okay, the vehicle is forfeited.
The forfeiture is the fine up to $2,000. So in essence, if you had a vehicle that was exceeded $2,000, you would have to come up and pay for it to actually get your vehicle back. Under the city charter, we're limited as to the amount of fines. You're aware. So the fines can only be so much. So we can't forfeit something that exceeds that cost. So if something, like I said, if I forfeited a $5,000 ATV, we could charge a $2,000 fine, but we can't actually forfeit that vehicle because it exceeds the full amount of the city's authority.
Okay, and then last but not least, and I know this is a tough issue we've been trying to address from a quality of life standpoint. In your opinion, I guess let's go over the last 2 to 3 years and operations that y'all have been doing regarding the confiscation of ATV bikes and dirt bikes. What's your level of success? What's your measurables in terms of seeing if the policies are effective in addressing this issue?
Well, they're incredibly effective in the fact that what we're seeing is we're not seeing the same ATVs recycled as we had in the past. So we were, in fact, doing this type of enforcement years ago. We didn't ignore it. However, the vehicles had to be processed through the livestock program, which was the only mechanism we had. And the livestock program is not designed to forfeit vehicles. So if the owners show up with, I own this vehicle, this is my vehicle, whoever took it, my son took it, the owners will get them back. And so we saw the same vehicles being recycled over and over again as a result of what the ATV ordinance did and what this body put forth. That's no longer the case. And I honestly, my own personal opinion, I think we're seeing more dirt bikes out there now than ATVs. ATVs are still an issue, don't get me wrong. But I think we're seeing a heavy influx of more dirt bikes, which are more readily available now than the ATVs because of the success of the program.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Chair recognizes Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Bass?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do apologize. I wanted to be noted as present. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yep. Present.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas, and good afternoon, everybody. I also want to thank Vice Chair Squilla and our co-sponsor, Councilmember Green, for their support on this legislation. I also want to thank you, Mr. Healy, for your testimony today and support, and also the District Attorney and the Police Commissioner and D.C. Dales and several other people in the department, including Inspector Evers, have all been very supportive and helpful, so appreciate it. You know, the issue here now isn't so much quality of life as it has been. It's more now, in my opinion, public safety. I'm really concerned that we're going to have a real issue here, and I hear from all over the city on a public safety issue. I'm just crossing my fingers that we don't have a fatality from these issues, and it's just very concerning to me. But this bill makes technical modifications to the definitions of off-road vehicles. It provides legal clarity for the police department to enforce our already existing laws and increases safety by removing these vehicles from our streets when they're ridden illegally. So the amendments we're really introducing today are technical and merely change the structure of the definition of off-road vehicles. They don't change the substance of the bill. So I want to thank everyone on this committee, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity of this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom, and as well as Councilmember Squilla and Councilmember Green. We appreciate your leadership. Chair again recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
I'll defer, Mr. Chair, until the next panelist.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Are there any other questions for this particular panelist?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is Councilmember Bass.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Bass.
I have a question, and I do apologize because I'm late arriving. But I'm wondering if the Staff Inspector Healy or whomever on the call could address Councilman Dom's question about safety. Do you have statistics on, injuries, fatalities, information like that to address that concern?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. The direct safety issues, we have to parse out from the normal accidents because we don't actually categorize them as an accident resulting from one of these incidents. But I can look into it. So I'm not exactly sure, I'll be very honest with you. But we all know the hazards. We've seen some of the videos that were out there. I'm quite honestly surprised that more of these young individuals don't get killed or run over by accident for some of the things they do. So that's what we're hopefully trying to avoid. But direct statistics on that, I will look into to see if we can parse them out. But I haven't heard of any serious accidents or fatalities yet. But as Councilman Dom said, we're trying to avoid them from happening. It seems every year.
Yeah, you don't want to, do anything that's going to put people in danger or affect someone's safety. But at the same time, we as legislators need to make important decisions based on data and information. And so if, I'm just a little bit concerned in terms of there being a rush to judgment, somewhat. Because I think that there is reason for concern. I don't want to make it seem like there's no reason for concern, but I guess my question and concern is around the lack of information or the lack of data that is driving a big part of this conversation. If people are saying that they don't want ATVs and these types of vehicles on the street because it is a safety concern, then I think we need to parse that out, peel it back, and know exactly what it is that we are doing or attempting to do to make sure that we adequately address the concern. So I just wanted to put that out and on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Councilmember. That's important. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions for this particular witness? Okay, hearing none. I want to thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate it. And Mr. Clerk, what we'll do is you can call the next witness, but after you call the next witness, the chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson to do a brief introduction before the witness actually communicates their testimony. Mr. Clerk?
The next witness to testify on Bill 210423 is Brittany Young from the B360 program.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, as always, thank you for your leadership. And just want to take a moment to thank Ms. Brittany Young, who operates the B360 program, which is a dirt bike diversion program. And I thought it was very, very appropriate to reach out to her and ask for her to participate in this hearing, just simply for the fact that we want to address the issue of, excuse me one second. Excuse
You're
me.
fine, Councilmember Johnson. It's a lot of parents on council. You get a pass.
So, but so in this particular issue, in this conversation, we want to make sure that we're addressing the issue of public safety in a way that also doesn't increase the issue of mass incarceration, but most importantly, criminalizing black boys. And so at the end of the day, we know the dirt bike culture is predominantly based upon African American young youth. And so having a chance to see a story about Baltimore 360, it really, really inspired me to look at what can we do differently as a city when it comes to thinking outside the box, when it comes to addressing this particular issue. And that's why I asked the question, how successful has we been as a city, right, in terms of getting ATVs and dirt bikes off the street? We want to make sure that everybody is safe. And we also want to provide an opportunity for a voice and most importantly, a space for our young people to still identify with the dirt bike culture that they are definitely going to be participating in, rather we in city council support them or not, but also making sure that we're taking a balanced approach when we talk about this particular issue. And so I know this legislation, as another tool for law enforcement, right? But let's also look at some solutions and some tools for our youth. And that's why I reached out to Ms. Young, who didn't hesitate to say, you know what, I'll step up and I'll participate and be a part of this hearing within a 1 day's notice. I also want to point to Cleveland, the city of Cleveland, where their city council just voted on a piece of legislation, split city council, believe it or not, for a dirt bike park on $2.3 million. And that was a result of doing a deeper dive. And I think this is about the third hearing we've had in city council about dirt bikes and ATVs. And so at some point in time, we have to begin looking at, okay, what are the solutions long term? And most importantly, making sure that we wrap our arms around our young people and give them alternatives and show them a level of structure as relates to, them riding dirt bikes or ATVs, because obviously we want to make sure that they're supported, but also the public, the wider public, and the ridership is safe as well. So I do understand it from that aspect. And again, I always go back to how people may say, well, skateboards, Councilman Johnson, you use that example, but skateboards aren't illegal to ride in the street. That's true. But nevertheless, in the early 80s, late and beginning of the 90s, late 80s, beginning of the 90s, there was a whole lot of skateboarding in Center City that was damaging developers' properties. And so people are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we wound up building a state-of-the-art skate park next to the art museum. So now you have no more young people skating in Love Park. They take their skating on to the art museum. And so we need to look at different types of alternatives for this particular culture of young people to give them a sense of hope and involvement in something that's positive, as opposed to, if it's riding in the streets and we know it's illegal, let's give them something different to do. So I'm going to wrap up those comments, but I want to thank Ms. Brittany Young for taking time out of her schedule. And Ms. Young, you can, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Chair, and he'll tell you when you can begin your testimony.
No, yeah. First of all, Councilmember Johnson, thank you. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your leadership. And Ms. Young, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, I ask to be recognized.
I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. I apologize.
No, apologies, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to come on and first thank our colleagues for continuing the legislative work around ATVs and dirt bikes in the city of Philadelphia from the safety perspective. But I wanted to lift up and also give kudos to Brittany Young from B360. Over the weekend, I read the article that I think was shared online multiple times. I know I saw it all over my feed. And I remember sending it to our Parks and Rec Commissioner Ott Lovell, at 9 o'clock on Saturday night. And I said, we need this here in the city of Philadelphia, because for me, I love that it not only uplifts the culture around ATVs and dirt bikes, but it also exposes the young people to opportunities in STEM in learning how to repair and fix the bikes as well. And we know, as Councilmember Johnson stated, and I wanted to thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for your leadership on this issue for so many years, because we know it is a culture here in the city of Philadelphia. And I remember working on one of the other iterations of the ATV legislation as a young legislative aid in council, and afterwards going with some of the riders in the community down to Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, to visit the ATV park that is put on with their PAL Center down there, to see if it's a possibility here for Philadelphia. So it's something that we are definitely interested in. We can't continue just to penalize and not recognize that it's also a culture around this, and we have to provide the space for the young people to recreate and do this legally, in addition to all the other work that's happening in the city, so that, they recognize that we also care about them wanting to participate in this activity, but do it in a way that's safe, and in a way that helps them to advance themselves and potentially their careers in STEM. So I just wanted to thank Councilmember Johnson and our colleagues for their work, and then thank Brittany Young for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say one last thing. I do want to acknowledge the author of the bill, Alan Don. And again, this is another tool for law enforcement, but I do want to acknowledge that he has taken it a step further by doing a tour in the 2nd Councilmanic District this upcoming Thursday of some possible land out at near the Philadelphia International Airport regarding the possibility of an ATV park. And so at least he's beginning to look at different alternatives, as opposed to just from the law enforcement standpoint, but obviously solutions for our youth. But I'm gonna let you turn it over to Brittany Young, because even our approach, we may be off, and just from talking for her a little bit, it has to be an overall strategy in terms of how we go about this. And so that's why I appreciate our expertise to be at the table. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Chair recognizes, Ms. Young, please state your, first of all, thank you for being here. Like others said, please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Brittany Young, and I'm the founder and CEO of B360. So one, I just appreciate, the support that I've already heard, and also I recognize that I hear everything too. I want to start there. As B360, we have the same goals of public safety. We want to transition people out of traffic into safe spaces and programming. And that's really been like our skill set, is having a mechanism to do so, because we want the same things. But my big strength and our big strength as an org is the empathy that we have. So when I listen to these conversations too, what I think has been a misstep is that strategy that councilman member just laid out. So as far as B through 60, I can talk about what we've done. We've worked so far with over 7,000 students here in Baltimore as an independent organization through our school system, through our recs and parks. And we've been able to hire and train more than 36 dirt bike riders who no longer ride in traffic to become instructors, but to also go into STEM careers. And when we start quantifying that information, that means we've saved Baltimore $1.3 million by doing programming instead of incarceration for dirt bike riders. And in the next 5 years, we're on track to save Baltimore $233 million by making sure those 7,000 students continue to have access to spaces, opportunities, and so much more. So I'm excited that people heard us on NPR. But what people didn't know is that we actually just created a space here in Baltimore as a pilot phase. Later this year, we'll be launching a campaign to actually raise money towards a permanent space. So right now, we have about 2.3 acres in the middle of West Baltimore, which is the home of dirt bike riding in this city. And in the program that we're seeing, which is typical, kids as young as 5, as young as 6 are excited to ride dirt bikes, but because there's no space to ride, similar to how somebody mentioned, is a space for skateboarding, is a space to do bicycling, is a space to do basketball. With dirt bikes, that's a problem. No cities so far have created spaces. And what we're saying is we want to continue to grow public safety, continue to grow outcomes for youth and young adults, but we're urging cities not to just make rash decisions. So even with this legislation, you could pass it today, you could pass it tomorrow, but what are the long-term effects 5 years from now? And that's what we want people to think about. And it's not just how do we all think about, legislation as a solution, but how do we also think about collective programming? How do we think about holistic approaches that we're listening to the police department and their needs? We're listening to the city government and their needs. We're also looking and listening to youth and young adults who ride dirt bikes and their needs, as well as people who pay tax dollars and cents. And so what I'm offering, and which I'm really leaning towards, and which I hope people take, is we want to be able to work in the forefront with Philadelphia, with Cleveland, with more cities, specifically to make sure there's a strategy that we aren't just making a rash decision into emergency situations. Today is also, I hope, as I remember too, the beginning of what happened last year with George Floyd. And so while I'm not harping in on the George Floyd situation, what I'm hoping is that that was also a teachable moment of why we need to de-stress and have a better narrative and a better control, that when you create legislation that puts police officers in positions to do more work for non-violent offenses, you also can create more hashtags and worse outcomes from PR strategy, but also towards Black and brown people in our cities, specifically those that ride dirt bikes. And so I really wanted to let people live in that moment with us. Again, we hear everyone, we empathize with all sides, but our strategy is that through listening, we want to make sure there's more of a system, there's a better approach, that policies that are made, even in the short term, can lead to better outcomes and goals, because yes, you all do need a space, but I don't think the work to be done in these areas should be led by the city government, because you can't be everywhere. It should be led by organizations like us. And me being able to work with not only your riders, but your police department, because we get it, we hear it, but we've already been leading and charging the fire in Baltimore. And in Baltimore, people don't realize possession of a dirt bike is a misdemeanor, right? And so we don't want people to make, again, policy that will criminalize people, but also as a short-term solution. And that's just really more about B360, but what I'm offering is really the chance and the opportunity to show people all across the country how to get this right by being able to work with all of the stakeholders, not one side. We're not all in favor of riding. We're not all in favor of legislation, but we are in favor of cities moving forward together. And that is what we're here to offer as B360. And Rashad is on too, who's my colleague, and I know he's not able to testify, but I also wanted to read his testimony too. And so Rashad Stanton says, with no recorded fatalities, this brings in question the urgency of public safety versus public misconceptions of ATV activity itself. It has not been proven that safety concerns besides perception and noted are valid data points. This further calls into question the use of lack of data to represent opportunities to invest in education and programming rather than criminalization of unnecessary fines as residents during the time of a global pandemic. So in summary, what we'll keep saying and keep seeing is that until you all invest in real solutions, dirt bike riding is not going anywhere. But until you invest in how they can build, how they can have a space, and you can separate the people who want to ride safely versus the people who are just doing this to cause problems, you aren't giving a fair opportunity to yourselves, but also to a whole generation of people that can grow up to one day lead your cities.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing. Can you just stay on for a second?
I have a question. Mr. Chair.
Yep. Chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla, and then after Councilmember Squilla, we'll come to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Brittany, thanks you so much for your testimony, and I really think you could be a big help to us and the ATV task force. If Councilmember Johnson wants to share your information, to be invited to the next meeting, and maybe even physically be able to visit the site on Thursday to see if it's something that is amenable or would work. We realize that there are, some of these guys are really talented, guys and gals are really talented riders, and watching them is very entertaining. But again, we like you say, you want people to do it safely in a place where there is no harm, and also that are protected from any type of violations. So we support that wholeheartedly. We'd love to work with you and others, whoever also submitted that, to be a part of this task force and see what we could come up with as a unit. And if it works, then we could hopefully press forward with it. If not, we can continue to look and see how we can best make this happen. So thank you for your testimony, and appreciate your willingness to help.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Yes. Thank you again, Brittany, for your testimony. I have a couple questions. So in terms of the B360 diversionary program, can you give us an idea of how that program is structured? Two, some of the goals, but most importantly, the outcomes and results of your diversionary program. And then last, in terms of overall engagement and strategy around B360's overall mission, can you give us an overview of what your approach is regarding dirt bike culture and ATV riding from a perspective of community and social engagement?
Yes, and I'm going to ask you to repeat some of those questions again. I think your first one was, how is our diversion program structured? So I was back up until 2017. So we are now the diversion program here in Baltimore, powered through the State's Attorney's Office, which is like to help reimagine public safety, which is great. But the work that B360 was doing started in 2017 and is idea in 2016 following the Freddie Gray uprising. Like a lot of people, I noticed the challenges in our cities, and again, I wanted things to be more safe, more equitable, and that's what I just did. So how our program works in general is that we work with people who are at risk of incarceration, boys, girls, kids. Our youngest student is 5. She's turning 6. One of the oldest that we work with so far has been 43. Without getting into too many details of the diversion program, because it's proprietary, and that's what we hope to hopefully be able to bring to Philadelphia. Our secret sauce really is the buy-in we have from stakeholders as a whole, that we can be in multiple sections and we can be in different communities at one time, and then being able to work directly hand in hand now with the State's Attorney's Office. So instead of people going to jail for dirt bikes in Baltimore, as I mentioned, it can be a misdemeanor, which means we look at people who are 18, 19, 17, all over, who can have dirt bike misdemeanor charges pending /20 plus traffic violations, which we get, officers have to do their jobs. It gives a holistic chance for people to redeem themselves. So far, we've had 3 referrals before we even launched. We've diverted at least 2 people so far who were under 21. And of course, the summertime, so we're predicting to have a lot more people come into our diversion program. But the hardest part of it, honestly, was getting that buy-in from the State's Attorney's Office. And once we had the buy-in, they helped and worked with us to make sure we also had an understanding and a rapport with the police department. So I get to work hand in hand with the State's Attorney's Office, the police department, and of course riders. And like I said, that's a part of the strategy, and that's something we want to, help Philadelphia be able to bring and to carry on. For B360 as a whole, our big thing is, again, we have the same goals as public safety of not wanting people to ride in traffic. We want to get to zero, hopefully by 2030. I have a really ambitious goal. The same way we have skate parks, the same way we have basketball camps, we can have the same thing for dirt bike riders. One of the biggest supporters we have right now, who is also based in Philadelphia, is Red Bull. Pre-COVID, we've done at least 7 events, which brings money, revenue, and tourism to cities. And that means we want to be able to transition that $32 billion motorsports industry into $100 billion plus with this style of riding. But that means having more cities work directly with us to do so. So think of, and I'm helping you all reimagine your city, a city where your legislation is conducive for both the police department and for riders, that you have a space for people to pop willies, to do training, to do programming that's led by B360. We also host events as positive reinforcement, which brings riders from all across the country, brings tourists from all across the country to host events the same way you would see it on ESPN, X Games, or in motocross. But in order to get there, we need to make sure we just slow down some, because once you ignite, honestly, this war, it's kind of hard to go back because you lose trust. And even with rolling out the plans for policy, you want to make sure, too, that you have like a marketing strategy that you're informing not only the riders, but the citizens in the community. But to really get to like the end goal, which I just described, that means being able to have a mix of both programming, but also having support for your police department where you're not putting them in situations where they shouldn't be in the first place.
Now, when you say all-out war, can you elaborate, clarify that, just for clarity?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say, I'm going to take some back of a war. I would say, a lot of decisions are made in city government that are rash and rushed, kind of like this one. So I think we often lean towards what's easy as opposed to how do we make lasting impressions that change the system and catalyze ingenuity. And that's like our skill set as an organization. So a war is what happens often when cities, and I can speak on my own city, when in 2012 they created a policy that makes dirt bike riding a misdemeanor. They didn't think about 10 years later when 6-year-olds are now a criminal just because they own a dirt bike, and that's the policy. Or they didn't think about, in 2015 when they rolled out a dirt bike police task force, which has the same goals that we do of making public safety, that they ignited a feud between not only dirt bike riders and police, but also two sides of Baltimore who believe in policing and who do not. And so when I say a war, I want cities to just think systems, but also approaches and mechanisms, because you only have one chance to get it right before you make it explode. And how it explodes is the continuing hashtags, as we all see throughout the country. And with this, again, being a year post-2020, I just want cities to just slow down a little bit more, especially for nonviolent approaches, because once you go back, once you get started, you can't go back. And that's what I'm most fearful of, is we predicted that 2020 was going to be a lot for people this summer. COVID is one thing, people ride dirt bikes too, and then just adding on the tension that's happening in our communities. And I want our skill set to be lended to you all.
Well, thank you very much. And I wasn't putting you on the spot in terms of using the word war. I think I just wanted to clarify for members of council and the wider public that we always try to work for a situation where we're supporting law enforcement, but also supporting our youth. But also our youth don't feel like that they're being criminalized, not supported, don't have a voice. And to give you an example, I remember where there was some type of operation to round up all the dirt bikes that were out on the street. And I remember it went viral on social media because it was like a helicopter, like that swooped in, and it was like real aggressive police tactics. And I'm like, we're not even doing that for gun violence, but we'll do that for, young people riding dirt bikes as well as ATVs. And so again, I'm all for making sure our young people are riding in a legal manner. I'll say that for the record, right? But I also recognize that the dirt bike culture is really predominantly African-American, black and brown boys that we don't want to criminalize even further. And so it's imperative that we work toward that long-term solution, and most importantly, make sure we're fostering a relationship between the police and the community that's one that's conducive, where we don't result a lot of instances that while we have the current climate that we have in America, today. And so with that being said, listen, I thank you. That's all my questions. And again, we appreciate you for your leadership and speaking truth to power in this space. And just want to thank you on behalf of the young people who are out there who are looking for a voice space in the midst of this conversation as we all try to figure out a way to reimagine public safety. Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate that. Now, and I would like to say too, to riders in Philly, we also will have to get to a point where we have to pick which one we want to do, and again, like I'm saying, I want people to get out of traffic. We have to be honest. Everyone won't, but everyone deserves the opportunity to have that you aren't just labeled as a criminal. And so my charge to also riders in Philly is also contact us too. So I want to be able to listen. I want to be able to hear, some of the struggles, some of the gripes. City Council the same way, and of course the police department about how we can make this work for everyone. And that's just, again, me leading that too. But I appreciate taking the time to have me.
Thank you, Brittany. We appreciate your testimony here today. We appreciate the work that you're doing in Baltimore. We will be sure to kind of spread the word. I think that it's important that we do hear from you, and we also hear from the riders, like you said. So thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for your leadership on this issue. And Brittany Young, thank you and the folks who are with you here today for your testimony and your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next panel?
The next bill we'll hear testimony on is Bill 210393.
So hold on, Mr. Clerk, before we go on to the next bill, there are no further testimony and comments on this particular legislation. I just want to make sure that my colleagues do not have any further comments or questions on this particular bill. All right, thank you. Hearing none, Mr. Clerk, can you please read the title of the next bill?
The next bill is 210393. We'll hear from Jeanette Brugger from Otis on the bill. Ms. Brugger, if you're on.
Yes, please state your name and begin your testimony for the record.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Jeanette Brugger, and I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator in the Office of Complete Streets in the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210393, introduced by Councilmember Squilla. This bill will authorize the removal of one block of parking on the north side of Race Street from North 5th Street to North 4th Street to shift the travel lanes to the north curb. This will make room for a protected bike lane on the south curb. This will extend the planned and funded bike lane on Race Street from 8th to 4th Street. When this bill was introduced in April, the block was no stopping anytime and not no parking. We coordinated with the Philadelphia Parking Authority, and the block will retain parking until the bike lane is installed as part of a scheduled repaving project on this section of Race Street in 2022. Constructing this one block bikeway link is consistent with the Philadelphia 2035 Comprehensive Plan, Connect Philadelphia's Strategic Transportation Plan, and the city's pedestrian and bicycle plan. This bikeway provides a safe, sustainable, healthy transportation option for people of all ages and abilities. There's demonstrated support for this project from the Old City District, Franklin Bridge North Civic Group, and neighboring property owners, including the U.S. Mint, the National Constitution Center, the View Condominiums, and the Independence National Historic Park. The Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability coordinated on this bill with the Department of Streets and the Office of Councilmember Squilla. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for this particular witness? Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the next panel?
The next bill we'll hear is Bill 210332, and we'll hear from Sarah Adamo from Licensing and License and Inspections. Ms. Adamo, if you're there.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Committee on Streets and Services. My name is Sarah Adamo, and I am the Legislative Affairs Manager for the Department of Licenses and Inspections. Today, I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 210332, which, if enacted, will amend Section 9-203 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Street Vendors. This bill would prohibit vendors from stopping, standing, or parking their vehicles for the purpose of selling any goods, wares, and merchandise on both sides of East Passyunk Avenue from Federal Street to Broad Street. The department has no objection to this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I am happy to answer questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for this particular bill? Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next panel?
Of course. The next bill we'll hear on is Bill 200627. We'll hear from Noel Marconi from Streets and Sarah Chu from Planning, and then from Brett Feldman for public comment on the bill. Noel, if you're ready.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here to offer testimony on Bill number 200627, introduced by Councilmember Squilla. This bill authorizes the owner to construct, own, and maintain a proposed building overhang at the property encroachment 1101-1107 Walnut Street and 138-140 11th Street. The Department of Streets is not opposed to these proposed building overhang encroachments, as the clear, passable sidewalk space to remain on Walnut Street and on 11th Street after its installation meets the complete streets walking zone minimum width. The department supports the bill as proposed to be amended. This concludes my testimony. I am pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll wait until the end of the panel for any questions. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness?
Of course, the next witness is Sarah Chu from the Planning Department.
Good afternoon, Chairmember Thomas and members of Committee on Streets and Services. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on Bill number 200627, amended, which was introduced by Councilmember Squilla on November 12th, 2020. Bill number 200627 is intended to allow for two building encroachments at 1101-1107 Walnut Street into a 5-foot zone that is on city plan as a public right-of-way but not legally open. This encroachment will only be allowed above 41 feet above the sidewalk level. The bill will also allow for similar encroachment on 11th Street. The encroachment on 11th Street is not needed to accommodate development at the site anymore. Additionally, a zoning bill number 210362 was introduced to allow the mixed-use development at the site, which the zoning bill was heard at the Rules Committee before Council early today. The Planning Commission at its meeting on May 20th, 2021, recommended Bill number 200627 for approval with amendment to remove the 11th Street encroachment. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can you please call the next witness for this panel?
The clerk calls for Brett Feldman for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I apologize. Please state your name for the record and begin with your testimony.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brett Feldman. I represent the owner of the properties and developer, and just briefly wanted to express our appreciation to all the stakeholders on this development project. This has been about a 2-year process, including a rules committee bill that was voted out of committee this morning. As Ms. Chu said, City Planning voted to support this with an amendment to remove the encroachments on 11th Street, and I believe Councilman Squilla's office will be introducing that amendment this afternoon. But this has really been a tremendous collaborative process over the last 1.5 to 2 years, and we'd like to thank the councilman, the Streets Department, Law, Planning, and community on working with us and your neighbors on this exciting redevelopment project. And with that, I would be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for this particular panel on this bill? Hearing none, I want to say thank you to the entire panel. We appreciate your testimony here today. Mr. Clerk, can you please read the name of the next bill in the next panel?
The next bill is Bill 210394. We'll hear from Noel Marconi from Streets and Sarah Chu from Planning again. Those are the only two witnesses.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here to offer testimony on Bill number 210394, introduced by Councilmember Squilla. This bill authorizes the owner to install, own, and maintain an open-air sidewalk cafe located along the north right-of-way line of Carpenter Street and east right-of-way line of South East Street. Department of Streets is not opposed to this proposed sidewalk cafe encroachment, as the 5 feet on Carpenter Street and the 5 feet on South East Street allow for a clear passable sidewalk space to remain after its installation, which meets the required complete streets walking zone minimum width. The applicant also followed the established departmental process. This concludes my testimony. I am pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next witness?
Ms. Chu?
Good afternoon, Chair Member Thomas and the members of the Streets Services Committee. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on Bill number 210394, which was introduced by Councilmember Squilla on April 29, 2021. This bill will permit the owner or the owner's designee of 941 South 8th Street to install, own, and maintain a sidewalk cafe that is located on the east right-of-way of South 8th Street and the north right-of-way line of Carpenter Street. The proposed sidewalk clearance for left for pedestrians are in the distance is in accord with the 2017 Philadelphia Complete Street Handbook. The Planning Commission at its meeting on May 20th, 2021 recommended Bill number 210394 for approval as an item in accord with previous policy. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of this committee for this particular panel on this bill? Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, can you please read the name of the next bill and call the next panel?
So we'll next hear on several bills. I'll read those bill numbers, and our witness on all of those bills will be Dion Bracely from the Philadelphia Parking Authority. They are bill numbers 210333, 210334, 210390, 210391, 210392, and 210416. Ms. Bracely, you may begin when you're ready.
Please state your name first for the record, then begin with your testimony, and you can communicate your testimony consecutively for each bill.
Good day, Council. My name is Dion Bracely, Deputy Manager for the Philadelphia Parking Authority. Thank you for allowing me to testify before Council regarding ordinances 210333, 210334, 210390, 210391, 210392, and 210416, establishing parking regulations. The Philadelphia Parking Authority has no objection to the ordinances previously read before Council and recommends favorable consideration. Thank you again for your time. I will be happy to respond to questions at this time. Hello?
Thank you, Ms. Bracely, for your testimony.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony, but we want to, can you can move on to
on all bills.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Thank you for your testimony. Right, I apologize. Are there any questions from members of this committee for this panel or this witness on all the different legislation that was just testified on? Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the next panel for the next bill?
So, the next bills to be testified on will all be testified on by Noel Marconi from Streets. And I will read those number, and Ms. Marconi, if you will then testify in consecutive order on those bills, that would be great. Those are bill numbers 210412, 210413, 210414, 210415, 210422, 210447, and finally, bill number 210448, which is the last bill to be heard by this committee today.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Please state your name for your record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here to offer testimony on Bill number 210412, introduced by Councilmember Parker. This ordinance establishes a no truck parking regulation on both sides of the 6400 block of Summerdale Avenue. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulation can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210413, introduced by Councilmember Parker. This ordinance establishes a no truck parking regulation on both sides of Lober Avenue between East Upsall Street and East Horder Street. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulation can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I am here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210414, introduced by Councilmember Parker. This ordinance establishes a no truck parking regulation on both sides of North 3rd Street between This ordinance establishes a no parking regulation on both sides of North 3rd Street between West Erie Avenue and West Sedgley Avenue. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulation can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210415, introduced by Councilmember Parker. This ordinance establishes a no truck parking regulation on both sides of West 65th Avenue between North Front Street and North 2nd Street. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulation can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210422, introduced by Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. This ordinance regulates the direction of movement of traffic on certain portions of Paul Street, Meadow Street, Tackawanna Street, Worth Street, Pear Street, Gillingham Street, Josephine Street, Blair Street, and East Montgomery Avenue, and making associated changes to parking regulations within the same limits. This bill is the result of a project between the Frankfurt CDC and the Philadelphia Planning Commission, which changes one-way patterns on various local streets in the Frankfurt neighborhood. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. Due to the size of this project, coupled with staffing and material levels, the signs can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210447, introduced by Councilmember Johnson. This ordinance establishes a no truck parking regulation on both sides of Chester Avenue from 66th Street to 67th Street. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulation can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Good afternoon, Chairperson Thomas and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noelle Marconi, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 210448, introduced by Councilmember Johnson. This ordinance establishes a no stopping anytime and tow-away zone on both sides of Webster Street between 20th Street and 21st Street. The Department of Streets has no objections to this bill. The regulations can be posted within 30 days of the bill's passage. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of this committee for this particular witness on these set of bills? There being none, Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next panelist?
That concludes bills and witnesses to be heard by this committee today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any other comments or questions from members of this committee? There being no further comments or questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I will ask that if there's anyone else present in the hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on any of the bills being considered today. Hearing none, I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinion. I now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the meeting before we go. Please disconnect from the meeting before we go into our public meeting. We will now pause the proceedings briefly as multiple participants leave the hearing. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now go into the public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bills before this committee today. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate you're present by saying aye?
Vice Chair Squilla.
Present.
Councilmember Bass.
I am present.
Councilmember O.
Present.
Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
And Chair Thomas.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of committee members are present. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a single motion to approve the amendments to the bills that are being considered today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer that an amendment to bill number 200627, an amendment to bill number 210423. A copy of the amendments have been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that these amendments be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the amendments to the bills just read by Councilmember Squilla be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries, and these amendments have been approved. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a single motion on the bills that are being considered today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the bill numbers 200627 as amended, 210332, 210333, 210334, 210390, 210391, 210392, 210393, 210394, 210412, 210413, 210414, 210415, 210416, 210422, 210423 as amended, 210447, and 210448, including any amendments that have been approved be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of these bills at the next session of council.
Second.
For the record, that was Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, who has second, and also for the record, Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Brooks is present. It's been moved and properly seconded that the bills just read by Councilmember Squilla, including any amendments that have been approved today, be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of these bills at the next session of council. All of those in favor of this single motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion carries. This concludes the business of the day before the Committee on Streets and Services. I want to say thank you to everybody that's a part of this committee. Thank you for your leadership. This was some important dialogue today. Thank you for your promptness and allowing us to start on time. And also thank you for your patience, because today was a little longer of a hearing than what we normally do in the Streets Committee. But we did get 18 bills through today, as well as some really important dialogue around ATVs and hopefully some solutions on what direction we can go in. So thank you, colleagues. I appreciate you.